If you're on the hunt for the best set of ANC TWS at around that £100, euros, dollars mark, then your search will inevitably have landed at one of these options. There's the OnePlus Buds 3 retailing here in the UK at £89. The Samsung Galaxy Buds FE retail at £79, but I picked them up for much cheaper sealed on eBay. Originally nearly double the price, you can now pick the Oppo Enco X2 up for around £79 since they've been around for a little while. The Realme Buds Air 5 Pro are an absolute bargain at between 50 and 60 quid. There's always a sale on Soundcore's Liberty 4 NC and you can pick these up for as low as £55 now. The Air 4 Pro from SoundPEATS, definitely the budget option. And last but certainly not least, the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2, which just about scrape in at $99.99. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at each of those options and comparing them and contrasting them over the following tests. We'll be looking at their design, build quality and some of their key specifications, their usability, how effective their controls are and how they wear, including the jumping jacks test and seeing which ones stay in your ears at 100 reps. There'll be none of this simulated background noise nonsense. You're getting real life call samples in a busy outdoor and a busy indoor scene. There's objective analysis through frequency response measurements. You're going to get to hear for yourselves how each of them sound through a binaural sound test. And you're going to get to hear how effective the ANC is as well using those binaural mics. There's barely any other TWS reviewers on YouTube who are including stuff like binaural samples, real life call samples, and even if they do, a lot of them hide them behind a paywall. With my channel, none of the reviews are paid, there's no subscription fees and no Patreon. You guys get everything completely free of charge, including all my measurements which you can use to auto EQ. So make sure you show the channel some love, subscribe to it if you haven't already, and do give the video a like as well. Anyway, enough of all that, let's get straight on with the comparison and we'll start with the design. Putting the Samsung to one side a second and focusing on the others, you may think, well, they've all got a fairly short stem, they must wear pretty similar. In fact, you'd be wrong. Those very small nuanced differences have quite an impact on how they wear in the real world. Starting with the Edifier, and it has a little bit of an old school look, but it does certainly stand out compared to the others. The short stem and gold accented Edifier logo has aesthetic appeal, and the way that the edge juts out gives you a large surface area to adjust the bud and also to initiate the controls. You can also adjust the sensitivity of the touch controls in the Edifier Connect app. You've got some degree of customization over the controls, although there are some limitations. You can't change single tap or tap and hold. You can change which noise reduction modes are available when you toggle through them. So if you wanted to take out noise cancellation off or wind reduction, then you've got the capability to do that. The first fundamental difference with the NeoBuds Pro 2 compared to those other stem-based options is the nozzle, in that it's quite elongated, it's round with a small diameter as well, and as a result it's a slightly deeper insertion than those other models. You will feel them a bit more in your ears, although the soft ear tips which Edifier have supplied do help mitigate that. And you should be fully covered for ear tips with no less than 7 different sizes in the box. This is a completely different approach to the BBK buds, all of which have got a very shallow insertion. What does that mean in the real world? Well, if you're using them for exercise, cardio in particular, then the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 come into their own. They passed the 100 jumping jack test quite comfortably. I even shook my head around at the end to see if they would move, and they didn't budge one bit. They're also fine for doing other activities in the gym where their IP54 dust and sweat resistance gives you adequate protection. There is one big drawback with the design of the NeoBuds Pro 2 though, and that's the occlusion effect. You can hear your own heartbeat pounding back at you through the pavement when you're running either outside or on the treadmill, and this can be really off-putting. When it comes to the design, at the other end of the spectrum to the NeoBuds Pro 2, you've got the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC. Instead of inserting deep into your ear canals, they rest just inside it, filling the space around your concha. With a combination of grippy ear tips and large elliptical nozzles similar to those on the Apple AirPods Pro 2, they rely very heavily on a combination of friction and gravity to give you stability, an approach which has its pros and cons. They're IPX4 rated, so you can use them in the gym, although I've seen a lot of reviews and a lot of comments saying they couldn't get the Liberty 4 NC to stay in their ears. Again, I put them through the 100 jumping jack test to see how they fared. Unfortunately, they didn't get beyond 45. On the flip side though, they have absolutely zero occlusion. So if you're using these for dashing for the train or the bus or something like that, you're not going to feel your heartbeat pounding back through you, and that is a big plus. Now, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but for me, the Liberty 4 NC just look a little bit ugly. They're quite angular and they stick out of your ears a fair bit as well. That said, because they're a bit bigger and there's a larger surface area, the touch controls are probably a little bit easier than some of the others to initiate. You also get a little click tone to tell you that initiation has been successful. When it comes to customizing the controls, you've got much more play in the Soundcore app compared with what you get with Edifier. All of those gestures, single, double, triple and long press, can be customized in any way that you want, with only some minor but very logical limitations on what you can do with single tap. Like with Edifier, you can also customize which ANC modes are toggled. The 3 BBK buds, the OnePlus Buds 3, the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro and the Oppo Enco X2 have all followed a very similar design brief. They all have a very narrow oval shaped nozzle, and the nozzle is really short as well, which means that you're not going to get hardly any insertion, certainly no insertion into your ear canal. Again, it's going to rest around the shape of your concha. But whilst you would expect that would mean that stability would really take a hit, none of them actually did that badly in the jumping jack test. The Realme Buds Air 5 Pro did okay, only falling out after 81 reps. The Oppo Enco X2 only just fell short, making it to 97 before they fell out. And the OnePlus Buds 3 actually made it to 100, although they did feel like they were going to fall out the whole time. None of these options really knock it out of the park when it comes to moisture and dust resistance. The OnePlus Buds 3 tops the charts with a respectable IP55, and whilst the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro doesn't have any certified dust resistance, they are IPX5. The Oppo Enco X2 are IP54. Now, when it comes to the fit, it's worth remembering that each individual user has their own unique ear shape, size and anatomy. Whilst the design of these buds has made them unstable for me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same for you. So if you've got the opportunity to try these out first, sale or return through Amazon, something like that, then I'd take that opportunity. For many of us, the first thing to try to improve that fit and stability is switching up the ear tips. For the Oppo Enco X2, Feula do a medical grade latex tip, which is much grippier than the stock, and its largest size is larger too. I found this solved all my stability issues. It also has a cutout for the pressure release opening on the buds, which is important because if you block that, they can feel a little bit stuffy and the audio can also suffer as a result. For the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro, you'll need something that's a little flatter, something like these from EPZ, or the stock ones that come with the SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro. There is some minor occlusion on all of them. The Oppo Enco X2 probably the worst in that respect, but you could use all of them for jogging, although as I said, that stability, whilst it did pass the jumping jack test, I'm not sure I'd put it through a 5K. The major difference here between the three is in the aesthetics, with the OnePlus Buds 3 being much more rounded than the other two. The Realme are a non-integrated design, meaning the stick bit on the outside reaches all the way to the top. It doesn't round off at the end. As a result, they can be adjusted a little bit easier and the controls are a little bit easier initiated. But they do have one big drawback, and that's non-capacitive touch controls, which means if you're wearing them with a hood or a beanie, you might see a few accidental triggers. Thankfully, that's not the case on the Buds 3. And they also have swipe controls for the volume, which I find work really well. The Oppo also uses swipe for volume and pinch controls for play, pause and other functions. All three models give you similar levels of customization, similar to the Soundcore in that you can pretty much tailor everything. On the Realme, single tap isn't a thing, which is handy because of those accidental touches we mentioned previously, but otherwise it's only logical limitations. The Hey Melody app works in a similar way to Realme Link, and it works for both the Oppo Enco X2 and the OnePlus Buds 3. giving you similar levels of customization. SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro looks a little bit more conventional in that the edges are rounded, similar to the Apple AirPods Pro. The touch control areas are finger-sized and flatter, and they're certified IPX5. They also have an oval-shaped nozzle, although it's a little bit smaller than the BBK buds, and the nozzle is a little bit longer too. As a result, they sit in your ears a little bit deeper than the previous three which you've seen, but not as deep as the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2. And for me, this is the Goldilocks zone because it gives you great noise isolation, but at the same time it's super comfortable. The stability on cardio is excellent. They passed the jumping jack test comfortably, and I never felt at any point like they were going to fall out. There's virtually no occlusion either, so for light exercise and for everyday use, SoundPEATS really did get that balance of comfort and stability spot on. Where SoundPEATS falls short is in the controls customization. It doesn't let you change the controls whatsoever in the SoundPEATS app. Finally, the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE, the only ones without a stem and the only ones with a wingtip. You've got a nice flat finger-sized area for the touch controls and a short rubberized fin that probably isn't going to be big enough to prevent them falling out of your ears. The nozzle on this one is round and it's quite short, so it's not going to sit too far into your ear canal. I found that they were pretty comfortable with good stability, but you had to size up with the ear tip to get decent isolation. Try not to get caught out in the rain with them though, because these are only IPX2. They successfully passed the 100 jumping jacks test, although I did have to adjust them a couple of times before I was satisfied that they were perfectly secure. The shallow depth also minimizes that occlusion effect. The Buds FE don't really give you much customization when it comes to the controls either. You can switch them off altogether. You can switch off tap, double tap, triple tap, or touch and hold, and you can customize touch and hold. That's the only one that you can change, and you've got some limitations over what you can change it to. Although, that said, it's better than nothing. Being able to switch these controls off and their shape inevitably are going to leave some of you wondering if you can use these in bed as a side sleeper. Unfortunately, I found them just a bit too bulky. So as you heard there, each have their individual pros and cons, and it comes down to how you're using the buds really as to which ones will be the best fit for you. But for me, I liked the OnePlus Buds 3 when it comes to design and ergonomics. They're the ones that probably have the best balance of comfort and stability. I like the controls, specifically the volume swipe. You've got pretty much full customization, and they look really good too. The rounded edges mean they don't stick out of your ears too much like the Liberty 4 NC do, and the mirrored finish gives them a great aesthetic. When it comes to portability, I think pretty much every model there is pocket friendly, other than perhaps the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2, with the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE case being the smallest. All of the cases have a charge indicator LED on the front, but Edifier sets itself apart here by allowing you to customize the color. When it comes to battery life, again there's a few different things that you'll have to take into consideration. With everything switched off, the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro knock it out of the park with 11 hours single use. The Liberty 4 NC are at 10 hours and the other two there are between 9 and 9.5. However, if you're listening with ANC, then the Liberty 4 NC suddenly looked like a better option, giving you around 8 hours as opposed to 7 on the Buds Air 5 Pro. But this advantage flips again if you want to use your high-res codec. The OnePlus Buds 3 using LHDC and ANC on gives you way more than the Liberty 4 NC, clocking just over 5 hours as opposed to only 2.5. The Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 has the worst advertised maximum battery level at single use of 5.5 hours. However, it is less sensitive to those additional features that top out your battery, like high-res codecs or active noise cancellation. In my tests, I never got below 3.5 hours, and that's still better than what you get on the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC when you're using all those additional features. So it's important to understand your use case before ruling something out completely. Samsung Galaxy Buds FE advertises around 8.5 hours with ANC switched off. Real world, I got about 7, and with ANC on, around 5 to 5.5. With the SoundPEATS, I got just over 5 with ANC switched off, and just over 4 with ANC on. Sometimes a slightly shorter single-use battery life can be negated by having a quick charge feature, and several of the buds on this list not only have quick charge but give you quite a bit of extra juice in a very short space of time. The NeoBuds Pro 2 give you 2 hours playtime from 15 minutes plugged in, whilst the Enco X2 only needs 5 minutes plugged in to give you the same amount. The Liberty 4 NC give you a cool 4 hours from just 10 minutes of juice, but once again it is OnePlus and Realme that top the charts here, giving you a whopping 7 hours playtime from just 10 minutes plugged in. For total battery life, including case recharges, it's a similar story. The Soundcore Liberty 4 NC tops the charts with 50 hours. The OnePlus comes in just behind at 44, and the Buds Air 5 Pro and Oppo Enco X2 are both there on 40 hours. The others come in some way short, especially the NeoBuds Pro 2, which top out at 16. So overall, when it comes to battery life, I think the clear winners are OnePlus and Realme. You get excellent single-use playtime that doesn't seem to be obscured too much when you add in those additional features, and as you'll hear later, there are plenty. Their quick charge feature is also best in class. However, there's one area where they fall short, and that might be a deal breaker for you. Yep, if wireless charging is something you can't live without, then you've only got 2 options here: the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC or the Oppo Enco X2. Next up, we're going to be assessing active noise cancellation, and we'll start with the ANC strength with a binaural sample of how they performed in a busy coffee shop. So hopefully that binaural sample gives you an idea of which is the strongest. For me, it was definitely the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC, which performs well across all frequency ranges, although particularly those lower frequencies. Next up, it was the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2, which are probably the most uniform noise reduction across all frequency ranges, and probably the best at anything above 2 kHz. The Samsung Galaxy Buds FE also pretty good, particularly at lower frequencies, although not so good at higher frequencies. So if you're outdoors, then they're going to be fine there. But if you're on a bus and you're trying to cut out conversations, then they're not going to be quite as strong. The budget option, the SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro, again, very good at lower frequencies, not so good at those higher frequencies and not quite as strong as the Samsung, but the cheapest on the list, and you're getting a pretty good return for the price. And whilst the BBK buds have all been pretty good so far, active noise cancellation is probably the one area where they are a little bit weak. All of them performed similarly across the entire frequency range. The Oppo and Realme seemed for the most part slightly stronger, although it's really much of a muchness. If you're looking for the buds with the strongest ANC and that is the only thing that you're looking for, then unfortunately all of these 3 fall short. When it comes to different modes and strength settings, the L4 NC are pretty much out on their own with over 10 different variables that you can choose between, and they, like the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro and Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2, do have pretty good wind noise reduction. They also have transparency mode enhancements, but it's transparency mode where the Liberty 4 NC do really struggle. They're some way behind all of the others, none of which were particularly better than the other. I've scored them all around 7 to 7.5 out of 10, whereas Liberty 4 NC is around 5 out of 10. So if transparency mode is really important to you, again, this might be something that would choose you to rethink your decision. Next up, we're going to test how they perform on calls, both in a busy indoor and a busy outdoor scene.
Then we'll start off with the OnePlus Buds 3. I'm repeating the walk from the train station in a busy town here in the UK through into the town centre, so you'll get a mixture of traffic noise mostly, although it is quite a blustery day today here in the UK, so I'm expecting a bit of wind to come through as well. Right on cue, get a gust, which maybe you'll be able to hear, maybe you won't. I'll be taking each of these individual sets of earbuds on the same walk for consistency to see how they perform in this busy outdoor scene, designed to replicate how they'll perform on the daily commute. And this time the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2. And of all of them, this is the one actually, which is probably the most stable. I mean, all the ones I've tested so far felt like they're going to fall out of my ears any second. But how would they perform on calls? I'm extending this one to get some wind in the scene, as we haven't had too much so far, although I did feel a little bit of a gust come through then. It's only fair if we get windy conditions for each of them, even if the test is a little bit longer. I think that's a fair comparison so far against those other buds. This time the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro, I've made a mental note here because all of these, or pretty much all of these earbuds are white, and they're going to look really similar when I'm watching this back. So make sure that I leave a signpost to the bottom of the screen so you guys know exactly which set is being tested at any one time. And I'm dragging this out a little bit because they haven't had too much wind, and there it is. It's at the same spot every time, right on cue. So the wind just comes powering through. It's wind that, as I said earlier, is the Achilles heel for calls for TWS. So let's see and hear how the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro perform. And next up, it's the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE. And as I said in the previous call test, it's nice because you actually get to hear how much ambient sound there is in the scene due to the fact that they default or can default to ambient mode when you're in a call. It's quite frustrating. I spent the whole day yesterday trying to get some good recordings, but there was no wind whatsoever every time I pressed the record button. Today, actually, we've got a little bit of wind coming through, so I think it'll be a decent test for each of these sets of earbuds in terms of how they perform in this type of scene. And this time it's the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC. Again, I've got them on ambient mode, but I don't need it to be on ambient mode to hear and feel how much wind is coming through. Quite a strong gust of wind there. Same level of traffic as well as the previous test. Interested to hear how the Liberty 4 NC compares to some of its other competitors that we tested so far and that we've got coming up in a moment. Next up, we've got the SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro. Similar conditions. I'm waiting for the traffic light to change, so I've got plenty of traffic coming through. It's 5:30 here in the UK as well, so everyone's just finished work. Everyone's clearing out. So there's loads of cars going past. We've even got a police car or ambulance or something coming through. A big trailer and a big gust of wind right on cue that's come through there. So solid test this time to see how the cheapest of the bunch, the Air 4 Pro, performs. And next up, the Oppo Enco X2. I think the last one in the series of earbuds which we're testing today. And if I remember correctly, in the earlier TWS call quality test videos, which have been really popular with you guys. Obviously, call quality is a big thing. They sucked. They were really bad. They are quite old, so I could explain it. But a lot of traffic coming through as soon as you've got any kind of wind. I'm approaching the point normally where the wind comes through. It only comes through quite gently. So maybe it's not necessarily. Oh, there we go. A little bit of wind coming through there. So hopefully a true reflection and a good comparison of how each of these buds are going to perform on your outdoor calls, when you're walking to work, school, college, etc.
So as you heard there, pretty much all of the buds struggle with the wind on that busy outdoor scene designed to replicate what they might sound like on the daily commute. For me, the better performers included the OnePlus Buds 3, the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro, and in particular the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2. The SoundPEATS again did pretty well considering the price, although it did soften your voice a little bit. The Oppo and the Liberty 4 NC were particularly poor. What about indoors? Next up, you've got some clips from a busy coffee shop.
So first up, it's the indoor busy scene. I'm in a coffee shop here in the UK. You've got a mixture of sounds of indistinct chatter from people nearby. You've got sounds of the baristas making coffee. You've got music playing in the background. So it's typical sort of busy indoor scene. And the first I said is the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC. It's one of the few where you can use transparency mode while you're on a call. So interested to hear how they perform on your voice calls in a busy indoor scene. If you cast your minds back to my 2022 voice quality test, the Edifier NeoBuds Pro performed pretty well. The NeoBuds Pro 2 has 6 mics as opposed to the 4 that was in that original model. And I can't remember exactly, but I think it did perform pretty well on your voice calls, combining that noise reduction with amplifying your voice. But again, this is an opportunity for you to judge that performance for yourselves. And the OnePlus Buds 3 are, I think, the newest release of all of the ones we've tested so far. That doesn't always translate itself to better performance, but let's see. It's another from BBK, just like the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro and the Oppo Enco X2. So I'm expecting similar levels of performance, but this would be a good opportunity to see how they fare against some of those older buds at which it's competing. The Oppo Enco X2 are the wild card on the list because they were over $100 when they were released, but they've been around a little while now, so you can typically pick them up for less than that. I got them for 65 quid, which is a bit of a bargain, as they are very good all-rounders, except for in call quality, where they didn't perform especially well in any of my 2023 tests. But it's been a little while. Let's see how they fare in this comparison. And next up, it's the Buds Air 5 Pro from Realme. They've been around a little while now. It's another one from BBK. And if I remember rightly, they perform pretty good in busy indoor scenes. Although this test will be the barometer, see how they fare against those other sub $100 contenders. This time, the Samsung Galaxy Buds SE. And if I remember rightly, most of Samsung's buds actually are very good at amplifying your voice, although not quite as good at removing that ambient sound as some of their competitors on this list and in this comparison. The Buds SE are, I have to double check, the only ones on the list that don't have a stem. Sometimes that can count against it in terms of call quality, but let's see if it makes a difference. This time it's the SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro. They're probably the cheapest of the buds in this test, in this comparison. They've been around a little while as well, but they still remain SoundPEATS flagship set. They're Qualcomm chipset based, and the mic, if I remember rightly, had quite aggressive noise reduction that could turn your voice a little bit muffled. So let's see how it fares in this comparison.
For me, on the indoor tests, you heard how much of a challenge it is for budget TWS to perform well in a complex scene. All of them performed quite similarly. I didn't hear any of them sounding outstanding in the way that the Huawei FreeBuds Pro 3 perform, and you'll hear that in a forthcoming review. Certainly, I wouldn't be looking to use these in a busy office where you need to present or something like that. But if you're able to reduce the sounds around you and you're just using them for the odd phone call, then I think all of them perform quite adequately. As I mentioned in one of the clips, one of the nice to haves is the ability to automatically switch into transparency mode when you're on a call, and the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE and the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC both have that feature, and most of the buds as well you can actually switch into transparency mode, certainly the BBK ones, but that wasn't the case with all of them. Next up, we're going to take a listen to some binaural samples of each so you can hear what that sound signature is like, along with their frequency response measurements. We'll go into more detail after this. So only a very short clip, but hopefully enough for you to discern some of the audio characteristics of each of these buds. Let's start by looking at the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2. If you're a fan of the original NeoBuds Pro, you'll recognise this sound signature very much the same, although they've added a little bit more sizzle in the treble. They've also thinned out the sub bass ever so slightly, and that combined with the bump at 70Hz, which they've kept from the original, means that you're getting a slightly punchier kick drum. They've used a Knowles balanced armature alongside the dynamic driver to handle the trebles, so I was half expecting that BA timbre and for them to sound a little bit less than natural, but that certainly wasn't the case. They have quite a wide horizontal sound field, and the distortion was pretty low as well, which suggests that they've used decent quality drivers. The recession in the mid-range means that these perhaps aren't the most musical set, and male vocals in particular can get lost a little bit in R&B tracks, for example. But if you're into more energetic genres like EDM and techno, where a bit of bleed into the mid-range isn't going to be too much of a problem, then you'll definitely be satisfied with these. You do get to tweak the sound quite a bit as well in the Edifier app. You've got a custom EQ, and whilst it looks a bit primitive in that you've only got 4 sliders, you see the boxes at the bottom where you've got 100Hz, 2000Hz, etc. If you touch one or more of those boxes, then it will allow you to change the specific frequency which you're tweaking at that time. This allows for much greater accuracy in terms of tweaking that tuning, and it allows you to look at a graph like the one I've included here and tune the buds from there. You've also got a couple of specially hand-picked Edifier presets, although I didn't really rate either of them. So onto the Liberty 4 NC, and like with the Edifier, I don't think the clip necessarily does justice as to how bassy these two sets of TWS are. Both have quite a bit of extra fat in the mid bass over your typical Harman buds, but the Liberty 4 NC leave even more into the mid range, and that can get a little bit problematic with genres like rock and metal where things can sound a tad congested, and they definitely lack a little musicality or more complex arrangements in jazz and classical, for example. Even with some EDM where you've got female vocals and everything is in the mid bass, the female vocal can sound a little bit too far set back. It's not bad by any means, but it's certainly not as neutral or natural as some of the others on this list. Whilst more drivers doesn't necessarily equate to a better performance, if you're a consumer that likes a V-shaped sound, an energetic, vibrant sound with a heavy bass line, then I'm sure you'll notice the difference between these two models, with the NeoBuds Pro 2 sounding significantly better. That subwoofer style lower frequency response just has better texture and better control on the Edifier, whilst the trebles are more detailed and less splashy. It also has a far more immersive soundstage. Thankfully, Soundcore give you loads of tools to tweak the Liberty 4 NC to your preferred sound. There's the Hear ID preference test, which I didn't really find work for me, but I know other reviewers have found it useful in the past. You've got an 8-band custom EQ, although these are fixed EQ points, so a little bit more limited compared to the Edifier. And you've got an absolutely crazy amount of different presets, so finding out your ideal sound shouldn't be too much of an ordeal, although it could take you a while. OnePlus have tried to stay more faithful to the Harman target with their tuning of the Buds 3, which are neutral and natural sounding compared to those first two. The bass is very well controlled, although there is enough texture to it that you can feel it, but not too much weight that it colours the mids. The upper mid-range is scaled back a little bit compared to target, and as a result, female vocals sound a little bit softer, not too far back, but definitely not sibilant. You notice that the Buds 3 have probably the biggest treble extension of all of the buds that we've tested here, and as a result you've got really good shimmer to percussion, although it can leave that note weight feeling a little bit too light. The Buds 3 are one of the better options if you like long listening sessions and you're not too bothered that the tuning is perhaps a little bit safe for some of those more energetic genres. OnePlus also give you plenty of tools to tweak the sound, including Golden Sound, which is their equivalent to Soundcore's Hear ID. This changed the sound much more than their presets, which I found were really only fine-tune adjustments. OnePlus also give you a custom EQ, although it is quite limited compared to some of the ones that we've seen previously. The Oppo Enco X2 boasts the same dual driver arrangement as the OnePlus and the Realme, but it feels like the quality of the drivers are better than the aforementioned two. There's less distortion and the transient response seems better as well. The tuning is very similar to the OnePlus Buds 3, although the Buds 3 is, I suppose, slightly more energetic given that extra treble extension. The Enco X2 has a smoother sound than the OnePlus Buds 3, but the better driver quality means that you don't lose any shimmer off your cymbals or percussive elements. So for prolonged listening sessions, they're probably an even better bet than the OnePlus Buds 3. The Oppo also gives you the golden sound feature, although there's no custom EQ this time. Instead, you've got a choice of 4 presets, 3 of which are tuned by Dynaudio, and all of them are very usable. Dynaudio Punchy is, as it sounds, a punchier sound, particularly in your kick drums, although it does scale back the treble a little bit. All of these presets are very usable, and this gives the Enco X2 a definite advantage in that you're going to be less likely to have to move into that custom EQ to get the desired sound. And finally, for the BBK buds, the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro, which show that BBK have, in their view, found the ideal sort of sound and only tweaked it ever so slightly between each of the 3 models. They're the warmest sounding of the 3. The bass isn't quite as punchy as on the Oppo Enco X2, and it also bleeds into the mid-range a little bit more, but for me that isn't necessarily a problem. There's a thicker note weight, and with male vocals, in particular soul and R&B genres, the Buds Air 5 Pro sound really good. And despite the added warmth, there is a discernible wider horizontal sound field than the other 2 models, only slightly, but it is certainly noticeable. As I mentioned previously, all 3 of these models do have a slightly overemphasized treble extension, so if you're treble sensitive, you might want to dial this back a little. Whilst Realme is the only one of the 3 that doesn't use the Hey Melody app, the Realme Link app does look suspiciously familiar. Like the Oppo, you've got a total of 4 individual presets, and you've also got a very basic streamlined custom EQ. They've also included the golden sound option, which was present on the Oppo Enco X2. Bass is the name of the game in Realme's target market in India, so they've included a dynamic bass slider allowing users to boost it further. The amount of control that all 3 of these models gives you over the sound is really commendable, especially when you consider that the sound quality itself out of the box is pretty decent on all of them. All 3 of these models offer a more balanced and more musical experience than both the Liberty 4 NC and the NeoBuds Pro 2. However, for me, the Enco X2 just about shades it when it comes to sound quality due to the perception of better drivers. And finally, the 2 remaining single driver options, starting with the Galaxy Buds FE. And what they lack in the number of drivers and fancy codecs, they more than make up for with smart tuning. Yep, the Buds FE clearly take everything that Samsung have learned over their last few releases and encapsulated it with a very organic and musical sounding set. It's another that is very clearly inspired by the Harman Target, although Samsung have given a little bit of extra oomph in the lower frequencies. And there's a real focus on the mid-range here. As I said, it's a more musical sounding set, whether it's pianos, woodwind, strings, all of them have a very discernible weight and texture that is more realistic than those other sets so far. Take the Oppo Enco X2 for example and listen back to those 2 samples and judge for yourself which one sounds a little bit more forced and which one sounds more true to the source. I think the Buds FE are helped by having more sub-bass, whereas these other sets are very much mid-bass focused. And this helps those lower frequencies sound a little bit more cohesive. There is minimal bleed into the mids. The mids are perhaps more transparent than the graph would suggest. They have a pretty wide sound stage. Instrument separation is good and placement is very straightforward. There's pretty good precision to everything really other than perhaps the trebles, which do lack a little bit of definition. As I mentioned previously, the Oppo, the OnePlus and the Realme all have slightly more of a treble extension, bringing more air to the sound, but it can leave it sounding a little thin with certain genres. With their high mid-range accuracy, slightly boosted sub-bass and ever so slightly rolled off treble, it makes the Galaxy Buds FE probably the most versatile sounding set in this comparison, which is fortunate really, since Samsung give you very little control over the sound, only giving you a handful of presets and no custom EQ. Finally, we've got the Air 4 Pro from SoundPEATS, which steps outside their comfort zone really, compared to a lot of their previous releases, which were typically warm and bassy sounding. This is very much a cleaner, leaner sort of sound that aligns very closely to Harman. On the sample, you'll have noted that it probably sounds the thinnest of all the options, even thinner than the BBK buds, and that's because sometimes it can, particularly when you're listening to genres like dubstep, garage, drum and bass and techno, where there's a heavier concentration of sub-bass. Then that lack of rumble on the Air 4 Pro, even compared with something like the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE, is really quite palpable. And their tuning also brings the upper mids forward a little bit, so if you're a fan of pop with female vocals, Ariana Grande for example, then I think you'll almost certainly like how sweet and crystalline her voice sounds on the Air 4 Pro. At the same time, if you haven't got too much going on in the arrangement, like the sample that you heard, they can just sound a little bit too thin. The SoundPEATS app do give you ample options to tweak that sound though, not least through a bunch of presets, not quite as many as Soundcore, but still quite a few, and many of them usable. There's a plus or minus 6 9-band custom EQ too, so plenty of customization available there. As you can see, I have actually used this myself, and it was included in my separate review of the Air 4 Pro. SoundPEATS have also included a Hear ID style sound test. It plays an array of different frequencies at different volume levels, and at the end of it spews out a report which is meant to define your ideal sound signature. Whilst you might find these tools useful, for me, even with some minor hearing loss from my days as a DJ and a producer, it hasn't really ever in any of the different brands given me a sound signature which is anything like the sort of sound which I prefer. The Soundcore one, I suppose, is probably the pick of them, although for me, I think all of them are just a little bit of a gimmick. Sound is very subjective, as we know. I've tried to score each of the buds in individual areas and come up with an overall leaderboard. That's what you can see here, and as you can see from the numbers, there isn't a great deal of difference in terms of the performance overall, but there are definitely some noteworthy observations. I'm definitely not a bass head. I like bass, but I like it to be textured and controlled rather than subwoofery, so automatically that's going to put the NeoBuds Pro 2 and the Liberty 4 NC at a bit of a disadvantage over something like the Galaxy Buds FE. I'm also a big fan of Anjuna style melodic techno, so any set of buds that has got a more musical presentation of the mid-range and plenty of transparency, then they're always going to curry favour with me. And there you go, that's why the Oppo Enco X2 is in the #1 spot. Personally, I hate watching YouTube reviews where reviewers just give completely subjective scores of sound quality without any real justification. Here I've included a leaderboard, but I've also included those binaural samples and those frequency response measurements, so hopefully there's a little bit more of a scientific approach, allowing you to balance understanding my rationale with also judging to a degree for yourselves. Finally, we're just going to go through a checklist of some of the features so you can check back to this section just in case there's something that you're looking for, like in-ear detection or multipoint, and you need confirmation that the model that you're looking for has got it. The NeoBuds Pro 2 are Bluetooth 5.3 like all of the other buds except for the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE and the Oppo Enco X2, which are 5.2. In reality, this makes little difference. All of them held pretty good connection, except for the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro, which would occasionally drop out in a busy office when connected to my laptop. When it comes to codecs, all the buds here support AAC and SBC, but the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 also support 2 high-res codecs, LHDC 192 and LDAC. The Oppo Enco X2 also support both of these high-res codecs. The Buds 3 are LHDC only. The Liberty 4 are LDAC only. Likewise, the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro. The SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro is a Qualcomm chipset, so it only supports Snapdragon Sound and aptX Adaptive. And if high-res codecs are a deal breaker for you, you're out of luck with the Samsung. It does support their scalable codec, SSC. Otherwise, like the rest, you're defaulting to AAC or SBC. When it comes to the rest of the features, as you can see, it's the Soundcore Liberty 4 NC and the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 that lead the way, pretty much ticking every box. All of these models feature in-ear detection, although the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE only feature it for calls. On the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2, you've got more customization over in-ear detection in that you can choose it to just pause when you remove it or pause and then replay when you reinsert. Fit tests are quite useful to make sure that you're getting the right seal with the right tips. If you've tried the one on the Technics AZ80, it takes you through every single set of the stock tips. There's nothing like that here. It's just a very basic yes or no with each of the BBK buds using the AHmelody app, and a similar sort of thing with the Soundcore. All the devices other than the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE feature Google Fast Pair, the main benefit of that being the ability to find your device either by sounding a tone if the buds are outside of the case, or via an integration with the Google Find My Device app where it will locate the last place that you were when you used the buds. While Samsung doesn't have the ability to integrate with Google Fast Pair, you can still use Find My Earbuds in their app, and it will play a tone through either the left or the right earbud to help you locate it. We talked about customizable controls earlier in that the BBK buds in particular give you quite a bit of functionality, although the Liberty 4 NC take it to the next level. And all of these buds have multi-point connectivity except for the Samsung, although it will if you're using it with multiple Samsung devices. Yeah, that's right, you heard it, the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 does now have multi-point, as you'll have seen in that previous screenshot from their app. This was only very recently delivered via firmware upgrade. I have tested it and it seemed to work fine with a laptop and a phone. Sadly, a firmware update on the Liberty 4 NC has recently caused a little bit of instability with their multi-point connectivity, although hopefully this is something that will be updated in due course. The OnePlus Buds 3 seems to have the best multi-point connectivity in that you can connect to quite a few devices and then it will connect to whichever two seem to be switched on or nearby. That isn't always the case. With the SoundPEATS, for example, it will only have a memory of 2, so if you add another, you'll have to lose the first one that you paired with. All of these have a dedicated gaming mode, apart from the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE. The Realme Buds Air 5 Pro does seem to perform best on casual gaming, although all of them are pretty much fine, and they also give you lip synchronization on videos with that low latency mode enabled. The Edifier and the Liberty 4 NC also have a shutdown timer, which would be great for those of you who sleep with earbuds in if it wasn't for the fact that both are a little bit too bulky. Finally, a few of these models, notably the BBK ones, have spatial audio or something like spatial audio included. The best performing of them for me was the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro. The others just seem to open out the sound a little bit. That is, except for the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2. This is the only model that features true spatial audio in that you can map your head tracking. Sadly, I couldn't get this to work. It just seems to stick on calibrating. In the last firmware update, it did hint that this was a beta feature, so hopefully this is something that can be restored to the app and allow me to test it in its full glory very soon. So there you go, we've covered off all the individual areas with each of these sets of earbuds, and hopefully this will allow you to decide which one is going to be best suited to your requirements. I get asked a lot, and I see it on the earbuds subreddit all the time, what is the best set of earbuds that you can get at under $100? And each of these examples have got their pros and cons without any of them really standing out as better than the other in every individual section. As we saw, the Liberty 4 NC from Soundcore and the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 seem to have the most features, especially now that Edifier has added multi-point connectivity. Both of these models had stronger ANC than their competitors as well, but the sound is very bassy out of the box, and whilst both models do give you a degree of customization, the single driver holds Soundcore back a little bit in that even with some tweaking, still couldn't get that tonality quite right. And the reverse is true with the Edifier in that they've used a balanced armature and there is that slight hint of BA timbre on the trebles. Neither are the most natural sounding necessarily, and Edifier has some limitations over the touch controls in that single tap can't be activated. Other compromises on the Liberty 4 NC would be the rather muffled transparency mode and call quality. Whereas on the Edifier, you'd have to be comfortable with their relatively low single use and overall battery life. All of the BBK buds had their pros and cons as well. The Oppo Enco X2 is probably the best sounding of the three, although it's also the oldest. Its call quality wasn't particularly good, and it's fallen behind the more recent OnePlus Buds 3 and Realme Buds Air 5 Pro in terms of features. The Realme and the OnePlus are great budget options, although the fit means they're not necessarily the most suitable for exercise, and the ANC is also a little weak. The Samsung Galaxy Buds FE sounds great. The ANC is pretty good as well, although in terms of features it does lack quite a lot compared to some of these more premium feeling options. The absence of multi-point in particular is a big shame. And finally, the budget option, the SoundPEATS Air 4 Pro. Well, that's exactly what it is, a budget option. Quite a few features missing on it, although it does deliver some of the basics in terms of wear detection and also multi-point connectivity, and the sound isn't too bad either. Its ANC is fair as well, and they're really comfortable, so if you do have to make some compromises, then they're not a bad option. For me though, the ones that I pick up most often are the Samsung Galaxy Buds FE and the OnePlus Buds 3. As a package, they offer good portability in terms of the size of the case, good battery life, quick charge, better stability than the Buds Air 5 Pro and the Oppo Enco X2, and they're comfortable as well. The capacitive touch controls as well give it a big advantage when I'm wearing a hoodie or a beanie and I don't get accidental touches like I do with the Realme. The ANC isn't the strongest, but I can live with that unless I'm going on a flight, and then I can choose something more specialist like the Edifier NeoBuds Pro 2 or the Liberty 4 NC. The thing that does it for me with the Samsung is this tiny case. I can just pop it in my pocket when I'm going for a walk. The buds don't have too much overhead and they're quite comfortable as well. The sound is good and the ANC is good enough. And despite those lack of features, when you're just out and about and you're walking around, you don't tend to activate these things. It's when you're at home that you want to get the benefit of stuff like spatial audio. So those are my two preferred selections, although all of them have got their merits, and hopefully this video has helped you decide what's right for you. Please do give the video a like if you found it useful. I know it was a long one, but hopefully you've got some use out of it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. For now, it's ReganCipher signing off.